So welcome to the town hall portion of our afternoon and our weekend. So we're excited to be able to be joined by a handful of folks who are truly making a difference right here in this very building on the values that animate all of us, Faith and Freedom Coalition, and all of our membership. So thank you so much as as folks are kind of working their way through security out there. We're going to go and get started because we got to, obviously things are still moving fast and furious here in the building as they're kind of wrapping up business for the legislative break that they're about to take. So, this is a really a neat opportunity because our first visitor for us for this afternoon she's accumulated quite a reputation and a resume, if you will, on these issues in the U.S. House of Representatives. But Senator Marsha Blackburn has become a stalwart, has immediately become a stalwart in the U.S. Senate on all of these issues. And y'all may have noticed in this new session, in this new legislative session, she was given an important position on the Senate Judiciary Committee, which we were thrilled with to not only see all the legislative work, but she also is going to be one of the significant voices when the time comes for not only circuit court judges, but also any higher court judges that may come about. So as we're working through, I think this is going to be a real highlight for the weekend for you guys. So would you welcome to the stage Senator Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee.
Well, greetings, and how wonderful to see you all here instead of off campus, as we say, which is where you usually are when I have joined you. And as I do each year, I want to, first of all, say thank you to you for your interest and for your willingness to pay your own way here and attend a conference that is really going to shore you up and give you the information you need to talk to your friends and neighbors. I was just talking to a reporter outside the room, and he said, "Why is a conference like this important?" I said, "Let me tell you why. Fewer and fewer people believe what they hear on the evening news. And they listen to it with skepticism and doubt. But you know who they do believe? They believe their neighbors and friends. And I bet if I ask for a show of hands, how many of you every day get an email, hear from a friend, go to church and somebody says, "Look at this that I read on the internet. Is this true? What do you know about this?" The most important name in news now is not ABC, which I still call them the All About Clinton News Network, or NBC, or CBS, or CNN. It is the YOU. It is you and your circle of friends. That is who you're listening to. That is who they are listening to. They're listening to you. So I applaud you for being here. I thank you so much for your heartfelt interest. And I encourage you in getting the education that you need to help individuals know what is a constitutional, truthful vote. What is a constitutional, truthful position? And having them understand that indeed elections have consequences, and who is in charge matters, and who you're listening to makes a difference. I see Tommy Waller. If I want to know something about Israel, I know who to call. And these are people that you rely on because they are your friends. So thank you for that. Now, what I thought I would do today, a little bit different from what I've talked with you about in past years. Coming to the Senate, and you're going to get to hear from some of these senior senators who've been plowing away on issues here in the Senate. I thought I would recap for you what I think are the top 10 most important items that I have worked on since coming to the Senate. Then I'm going to yield the floor to some of these other guys. But, you know, it's always good to hear from a good, solid conservative woman first, right? Of course. I tell my family all the time I'm the chief mama in charge, and what I say goes. So there you go, the way I'm spending my time. The Title X Abortion Provider Prohibition Act. When I chaired the Select Investigative Panel looking into what was happening with Planned Parenthood, one of the things, you know, in the videos, and then we came up, figured out they were selling baby body parts. What we did was to put in place legislation that backs up what the president has done by executive order. It simply says this: Title X funding will go to its stated statutory purpose, which is to clinics that provide women's health care. And if you provide abortion services, you're not going to get that. The Title X Prohibition and the Protecting Life and Taxpayers Act, these two pieces of legislation, two of the first things that I did in coming to the Senate, because stating that we are indeed here to protect life and liberty. Oh yeah, what was that? The first thing? Life. So those are our first two things that we have worked on. Third, last month I filed the Campus Free Speech Resolution of 2019. This is, you are so welcome. And I've talked with a lot of college students. You know, it's inconceivable to us that in this day and age, that having diversity of thought would be considered to be harmful. And that students and professors are arguing about encouraging people to hear different points of view. So we have this, and it backs up many of our conservative groups. The fourth thing, in Judiciary Committee, we are doing hearings and addressing social media bias, and I am going to chair a working group in the Senate Judiciary Committee that will look at the issues of privacy, data security, antitrust, and online censorship. We think this it's important that we hold these online platforms accountable and that they move away from subjectively manipulating those algorithms that boot out conservative speech. Number 5, judicial confirmations. How do you like these new federal judges? Isn't that great? So far, we have confirmed 123 federal judges, and in Judiciary Committee today, we moved 4 more out to go to the floor. So President Trump has set quite a record on this, and we really do support what he's doing. Number 6, defending Israel. This is Senate Bill 1. Passed early this year, and item number 7 on my list, fighting BDS, and Senate Resolution 120. Number 8, defending Christians in Sri Lanka. Important that we weighed in on that. Number 9 is something we're continuing to work on even today, keeping maximum pressure on Iran and making certain that we support the president when he put these sanctions in place. Iran's economy is beginning to crumble, and don't let anybody tell you this is a new problem. This has been going on since the 70s. And we know that Iran is the largest state sponsor of terrorism. And I thought it was interesting, the Washington Post even reported that Hezbollah was complaining that Iran had cut off some of their money flow. So Hezbollah couldn't carry out their bad deeds. So we're going to keep the pressure on. And number 10 is one that we have just done today, the National Defense Authorization Act, making certain that our men and women in uniform have what they need to carry out the job that they're supposed to do. Thank you all so much for letting me be with you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Patrick Pertil. I'm Director of Legislative Affairs for the Faith and Freedom Coalition, and it is my distinct pleasure to introduce your next speaker. I think probably all of you will know him already, but let me say a few words. U.S. Senator Mike Lee was first elected to the Senate in 2010. Since then, he has been, as he was before coming to the Senate, he's been a leader on all of the issues that we care about. He was an accomplished attorney in private practice, a Supreme Court litigator before he came here, so it's no surprise that he landed on the Senate Judiciary Committee, where you have probably seen him in some made-for-TV specials like the Gorsuch hearings and the Kavanaugh hearings, which were all great sport. He has been a leader on a number of issues here. He's a leader on pro-life issues. He's a leader on religious liberty issues here in the Senate. We have worked and been particularly excited to work with him on a lot of criminal justice issues, which President Trump spoke about yesterday, and Matthew Charles also spoke to you a little bit about the First Step Act and what that has accomplished. None of that act would not have been possible without Senator Lee's leadership on the committee, both his commitment to the issue and to fixing where there are disproportionalities in the system, in the criminal justice system, the prison system. His commitment to that has been steadfast since he's been elected, but it was really not just his commitment to it, but his really smart approach to it. He made sure that it was a bipartisan bill, that it was able to come out of the Judiciary Committee, head to the Senate floor, and ultimately to President Trump's desk. So please join me in welcoming Senator Mike Lee.
Thank you. I never, ever get people standing for me when I enter a room in this town, so this is unusual for me. When that happens, I look around and I think they must be applauding for someone else. It's so great to be back with you. I love this organization. I love each of you. I love what you do. I love even the name of the organization, the Faith and Freedom Coalition. These are two concepts that define America. And they're two things that cannot exist one without the other. You can't truly be free without faith, and you cannot truly exercise faith without freedom. So in that respect, your organization does exactly what we as Americans do so well. Balancing faith with freedom, making sure that they both exist, so that either can exist. And when either can exist, so can the other. These are things that are easy to take for granted, and sometimes people do take them for granted. But we have to remember that for most of human history, prior to America's founding, a free conscience was not seen as a fundamental, unmitigated good. It was seen rather as a threat. From ancient tribes to modern empires, governments saw fit to subject the city of God to the city of man. The state decided, in most instances, what consisted of acceptable religion, and it punished whatever was not. Dissenters were punished, and so were worshipers of just about every stripe. Fortunately, our founders saw a better way. Fortunately, our founders envisioned an America, the kind of America that we would later become, the kind of America that we still are and that I hope we always will be. That is, as Americans, we're great not because of who we are, but because of what we do. You see, both faith and freedom are the consequence of a choice. We must choose every day of our lives to be free. We must choose every day of our lives to have faith. So our founding fathers set up a system that would protect both. It was one of the things that they did that was so bold and so brave nearly 2.5 centuries ago. I've talked for a long time and written extensively about our Constitution. And recently I came to believe that there's another document that's sometimes not appreciated as much as it should be, the Declaration of Independence. It's often been said, yes, I thank you. I'm glad there's some. It's sometimes been said that the Constitution provides the frame for our freedom. The frame as in around a picture, the structure. But the picture itself is painted by the Declaration of Independence. It's one of the reasons why I recently wrote a book about the Declaration of Independence. It's called Our Lost Declaration. All 12 people who have read Our Lost Declaration have absolutely loved it. I encourage you to become the 13th today. But what they did when they signed their name to that document was, in fact, treason. It was an act of open resistance against not only their own king, their own country, but what was then the world's last standing and greatest superpower. They truly pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. We have to ask ourselves from time to time, why did they do it? Was it worth it? They did it, of course, because of their love of their fellow beings. They recognized what I hope each and every one of us will always be willing to recognize. That is the eternal worth and immortal, immeasurable import of every human soul. That having been created in the image of God, we are entitled to be treated with respect and dignity, and we must treat each other that way every day. One of my favorite Frenchmen of all times, Alexis de Tocqueville, understood that our religion, our belief in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, even the Lord God Jesus Christ, was the source of our strength. As he toured America and tried to explain why it is that the revolution had stuck here, why it is that it worked here, why it was that we were allowed and able to be free and equally treated under a fair, just system of laws. He explained as follows, quote, "Freedom regards religion as the companion in all its battles and all its triumphs, as the very cradle of its infancy and the source of all its claims, because religion alone is the safeguard of morality, and morality is the best and surest pledge for the survival of freedom." We managed as a country to hold on to these emblems, these remembrances, these reminders of the fact that what makes us great is the choice we make every day to follow our God. It's been said, I believe by Winston Churchill, that we shape our buildings and then our buildings shape us. As I take the time to give constituents from my state and around the country tours of this great building, I'm often drawn to a couple of pieces of artwork that often go unnoticed. Both were made by Italian-born immigrants to the United States who were hired on as artists for the decoration of the Capitol. One was by Enrico Causicchi, who made this great sculpture that often goes unnoticed. It currently stands in Statuary Hall, also known as the former House Chamber. Liberty and the Eagle consists of a figure, I believe, representing liberty, with her right arm outstretched holding a scroll, most likely representing the Constitution. To her right is an eagle, representing far-seeing vision and strength. To her left is a fasces, a bundle of sticks representing e pluribus unum, representing the fact that we're greater, we're stronger than the sum of our parts. Normally, a fasces is held together by leather straps, by ropes, or by cords of some sort. In this instance, the fasces is held together by a snake. I was alarmed by this sculpture when I first got here. I didn't know entirely what to make of it, till someone explained to me a hypothesis that perhaps, maybe just maybe, this is channeling the words of Jesus from Matthew chapter 10, verse 16, admonishing Jesus' followers to be wise as serpents, but harmless as doves. You see, we have to trust and love your neighbor, but also cut the cards. Could it have been that the founders of our great country, including those who adorned its public buildings in the early part of our republic, understood this great truth, that the Republican form of government, any form of government that recognizes freedom and protects and professes the right to believe in Almighty God as each person deems appropriate, is itself wonderful and very fragile, is at once the source of our strength and our biggest potential vulnerability. Another one of these sculptures representing the same thing can be found at the opposite end of the building, on the Senate wing, in something called the Brumidi Corridor. The artist there, Constantino Brumidi, displays a cherub surrounded on one side by a snake and on the other side by a dove. We have to remember the important choice to be wise as serpents, but harmless as doves every single day. And so I hope we can choose every day to maintain the strength of our republic, to do so by choosing virtue, by making the choice between right and wrong and choosing to interact with each other in a way that properly reflects all of Jesus' teachings, including those to love one another. I bear testimony that God lives, that he is aware of and loves each and every one of us, that Jesus is the Christ, that he in fact died for us, that he paid the price for our sins, that he suffered for all humanity so that we might be free and we might return to live with him once again. I bear that testimony in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
So we'll let another day, we'll have Senator Lee, the constitutional expert, explain why someone like that is legally allowed to say something like that in a building like this. So this, hopefully this is encouraging to you. It's informational. It's current. I mean, literally off of the Senate floor. You know, like Senator Blackburn alluded to earlier, we do it in a hotel, large crowd, big stage and stuff. But I really love having this element, because I think that it not only does it allow us to be able to come into our Capitol, but honestly, it allows elected officials, like you just heard, to kind of lay it out right here in front of everybody, that this is who we are, this is what we believe, this is what we stand for, and we're not checking that at the door, right? So speaking of not checking anything at the door, any Oklahomans, family friends of Oklahomans? We got an Oklahoman on the front row over here. So that is God's country, and this is hard as a native Texan for me to say this, but God's country. But it's easier for me to say because he's married to a former Baylor Bear, and as you heard earlier when I talked about Dr. Paul, I think one of the clarion voices in American politics on these issues is our next speaker. Background as a minister that I think I'll tell you a little bit about, but he has truly influenced the lives of an entire generation of Oklahomans, really throughout the Midwest for that matter. But he worked in youth ministry for years and years, and after interacting literally with hundreds of thousands over the years of high school and college students, Senator Langford realized that the time is now and the calling is here to come to Washington. Several years ago, as a member of the United States House of Representatives, James Langford moved in and became a staunch and reliable voice on these issues. In the last couple of years, he's taken that voice across Capitol Hill into the Senate. So would you join me in welcoming our friend, Senator James Langford from Oklahoma?
May I have a seat? No need to stand and clap, and just unless you need to stand and stretch, be able to go. So let me clarify something on this God's country issue. In Oklahoma, we have more barbecue restaurants in Oklahoma than any other state in America per capita. Okay, so lots of other folks say they have great barbecue, and I'm okay, fine. Come eat ours, and you'll know the difference. But I joke with folks all the time that as you read through the Old Testament, it always talks about the sweet aroma of the sacrifice coming up. And I always say that even God likes the smell of barbecue. So it is one of those things that is always special for. My background is he was mentioning, it was in ministry. I was 22 years in ministry and served in youth ministry. And depending on your background with your own personal youth minister, to know that a youth pastor is a senator either encourages you or terrifies you, probably, depending on your own personal relationship with your youth pastor. I never expected to be in Congress. This was not in our life plan. This is what my wife calls life's greatest interruption. But in 2008, my wife and I separately sensed God calling us to be able to run for Congress. And we spent about 7 months telling God what a really insane idea that was. And saying over and over again, that's not rational, that's not possible. Because I was a voter, I was engaged in the issues, I was passionate about what was happening in our country, but I spent all my time working with students. I directed some of you may have heard of the Falls Creek Youth Camp. I was the director of the Falls Creek Youth Camp. It's the largest Christian camp in America. We have 5,000 students a week there. It is a very unique place to be able to do ministry. And if you're in youth ministry and you have the opportunity to be able to work with 51,000 students a summer, you take that. And that's my joy to be able to do that. But in 2008 and 9, God was very clear with us to say, I want you to do something different. And honestly, when we started praying about it, I really thought this was going to be an Isaac, Abraham kind of moment. That God was going to say, be faithful to pray about it, go up to Mount Moriah, but at the end, there's the ram. You don't have to kill your career. But we got to Mount Moriah and he said, no, kill it. We're going to do something different. And at the end of that, we finally had to get to the point to say, I'm going to be an old man one day telling my grandchildren about the time I didn't follow God. This is what God is calling us to do, and I don't know why, but we're going to go do it. Now, I tell you that story because it's not about us, it's about what God has done. But I'm also convinced that I meet people all the time that they say, my family doesn't have any background in politics. I don't have any background in politics. I don't have any money like all these other folks do. There's no way that I could ever get involved in that. But God. So my simple statement to some of you are here because you're grassroots activists and you're excited about helping someone else. And what you're really doing is disobeying God because he's telling you not to help someone else. He's telling you to do it. And you're short-circuiting what he's calling you to do. Complete what he's calling you to do. Now, I can't call you. That's not my responsibility. But some of you are not supposed to be helping. You're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be on the school board. You're supposed to be on the city council. You're supposed to be engaged in these issues. I don't know what that is for you, but I would encourage you to not be afraid to follow where God leads you. Don't be afraid to go there. I have folks all the time that say, I'm grateful that there are good people that are in Washington, D.C. because they'll change the country. I will typically smile at them and say politely, Washington doesn't change the country changes Washington. That's how it works. So the grassroots activists, the people that are engaged in the issues, that are actually changing the culture, and that's the family and the church and the communities and the nonprofits that are actually changing culture and engaging, that moves slowly to DC. And it moves slowly out of DC. So the transitions that we need to see in DC 10 years from now will happen because churches and communities and families are engaging in their local communities now. And that will slowly make it. What's happening in DC right now, culturally, is a result of what happened in our country 10 years ago. What would you like to see DC like 10 years from now? Transition your communities, engage as a church, activating real dialogue and conversation. And that's what DC will be like 10 years from now. It takes some time, but that's actually the way that it actually moves. Now, there are a lot of critical issues we're working on right now that are exceptionally important to us, those of us who believe in basic freedom. And not everyone up here does. One of my colleagues just 2 weeks ago made a public statement to say people that are pro-life are like racists and anti-Semites. There's no place for them in America. And when she made a statement that pro-life individuals, that there is no place for them in America because they're like racist and anti-Semites, she laid down a gauntlet to say, this is what we believe. We're going to do whatever we can do to silence those of you that believe in the value of children. We will make sure that your voice does not get out there, because I can't imagine anything worse in America than racism, anti-Semitism, and children. Can you? It's a really odd list to be in, isn't it? For those of you that love the life of a child, to be considered as the group that there is no place for them anymore in America. The way that turns around is not a vote. That's a heart issue. And that's the engagement that we'll have to do culturally in conversations. Right now on university campuses and all this fall, there'll be students standing and screaming in the face of people that they disagree with because they disagree with them, and they're going to work to silence their voice, to make sure they cannot speak. That's a cultural issue. That's an engagement about what is right and what's wrong and what we value. We turn that around not with a vote. We turn that around with individual engagement. Now, there are things like judges that we can work on here. We've got to be able to get good judges in place, people that actually read the law and, crazy enough, follow the law. I know that's a radical concept to some. We've got to get great judges in place, and we're working on that. In fact, the Senate reached a point just a few months ago that we reached the boiling point to say we're going to actually change the rules of the Senate, and I had the joy of leading the effort to be able to shift the rules in the Senate because my Democratic colleagues were blocking every good judge that was coming through, and so we shifted the rules of the Senate to say it doesn't matter who this judge is. If they are qualified, we need to be able to move them through, and we have doubled the number of judges that we're doing now in this basis now to be able to accelerate that. That is exceptionally important for us to be able to do, because we're not looking for judges with a certain opinion other than their opinion is the law. Follow that. We're not looking for certain bias. We're not looking for certain preference towards our point of view. Just follow the law, and we'll try to do the same. It's the most basic aspect that we can do in culture. Now, there's lots of things that we can work on. They provide religious liberty and they provide engagement in our community, but there is no substitute for us engaging with our neighbors. So let me just say this thing to you. Thank you for coming here and for encouraging members of Congress and our staff in the task that we're doing, because seeing you is an encouragement to us to be able to keep going, to be able to know there's people in my state in Oklahoma, God's country, as you've already heard, that are passionate about trying to do the right thing the right way. But it's good to know there's folks from all over the country that are also doing that. But again, there is no substitute for just having that dialogue at home with family, with friends, with neighbors, and not having an expectation that if I elect somebody, they'll go do my job. I have a job. So do you. Let's go follow God together and to see how we can serve our country and our neighbors and to see where this takes us in the days ahead. Is that a deal with you? Let's go do it together. Thanks for engaging.